Okay, so let's have a look at this analysis. I'm going to be looking at omniscient narration, which is just when the narrator knows everything, coloured narration, reflecting Tess's emotions, personification, semantic field of tragic prefiguring and words to do with the cosmos, caricature, dialect and accent, colour, and the landscape. And I'm hoping we'll be able to apply these to other passages when we look at them together. So this passage, as you've read, is the death of the horse prince. So first off, let's have a look at some of the dialect and accent words used here. So we've got the choice of coughed and creaked about, tipsy, and shortening Abraham's name to Abi. Or perhaps you notice that the mailman says, "Hoy there," or maybe that you was on the wrong side, I am bound to go on. Notice that actually a lot of the dialect we're looking at some monosyllabic words that have their roots in Old English, and sometimes you can hear her accent as well. "'Tis all my doing," she says down here. Now that's important because Hardy uses the accent, expressing it through word choice, idiom, and grammar, and it will be significant to the themes of modernity and social class, because Tess represents a way of life that really hasn't changed for hundreds of years, and her social class, as she starts to mix with people of different classes, will become very apparent. And it even contrasts to Hardy's narration. So I picked out in yellow some of the notes of narration that are interesting. And let's look at the words he's choosing: management, conduct, reverie, companion, vanity. Hardy's omniscient narration uses complex Latinate words in contrast to Tess's dialogue in its formality. And it's important to note that she falls into a reverie. This is going to happen on more than one occasion. It means a dreamlike state. And there are other moments in the story where she appears to sort of lose focus or almost feel like she's outside of herself or having an out-of-body experience. And in a way, that links to this semantic field of the cosmos, that there's a cosmic plan determining Tess's ill-fated life. Next, you might notice this ugly caricature here, the gentlemanly match awaiting herself in her mother's fancy, as a grimacing personage laughing at her poverty and her shrouded knightly ancestry. So basically someone who's richer and sneering at her. And although this is a sort of exaggerated caricature, it prefigures Tess's rejection by real men who you haven't come across yet in any great detail, but we're thinking of Alec de Herberville, and we're thinking of Angel. And in both cases, class is important to the power dynamic in their relationship, which is what's playing out here, laughing at her poverty and her shrouded knightly ancestry, because she's just a haggler's daughter. Okay, now down here, I just want you to note, this isn't necessarily a recurrent theme because it particularly fits this scenario, but Hardy describes sound and movement before sight, and that's quite clever. So we've got a sudden jerk shook her in her seat, the wagon had stopped, and then she hears this hollow groan, and then the voice saying, "Hoy there," and that all comes before the lantern appears, and then she just says something terrible has happened, and that is to show that it's dark, literally, and she's asleep, but it also allows the full horror to be revealed slowly for dramatic effect. So on the one hand, it draws out literally how she was unaware of what was happening, coming out of that dreamlike reverie, but also it's just an effective narrative technique. So maybe keep your eye out for other examples of it. It may not be as common as the others. Okay, moving on to this second page. We're picking up here some of the lilac words are demonstrations of coloured narration. So we've got something terrible has happened, discovered the dreadful truth, poor horse prince, despair, helpless. Now, this is not Tess's words. This is the narration being coloured by Tess's emotions. It's still third person, but Hardy colours his description with her guilt and horror and her pity for the old cart horse. Keep an eye out for that as you go through. Hardy is incredibly sympathetic to the character he's created, whom he has called Tess. In fact, he's almost besotted with her himself. He behaves almost like one of the lovers as he describes her. And in fact, he was actually besotted with one of the women who played Tess in a dramatised version on the stage as well. So keep your eye out for sympathetic things that show the coloured narration. And then you can see that contrasting with the formal language again, entangled, blocked, consternation. So the cart that drives into Tess and Tess's equipage, which just means her horse and cart. Okay, this incident clearly prefigures Tess's rape. This may seem a little distant at the moment, but you'll find it comes up in a lot of critical commentaries on this. Hardy edited this moment, in fact, to draw out the similarities to what happened in the chase. Now, the chase is actually like a woodland. I know it's called the chase, but that's because it would have been used for hunts in times gone by. And in the chase, Tess is like wandering around, she's waiting in the dark, and she actually falls asleep in like a pile of leaves, and he quite carefully mirrors that in this description. Prince stood firm and motionless as long as he could till he suddenly sank down in a heap. That's just like what happened to Tess, actually just before she was attacked. And this image here, the pointed shaft of the cart, had entered the breast of the unhappy prince like a sword, and from the wound his life's blood was spouting in a stream. Well, this becomes a phallic image of Tess being penetrated, and Tess's loss of virginity is prefigured in the image of his blood being poured out on the road. And in fact, it splashes on her face. We go further down. She became splashed from face to skirt with the crimson drops. That image of blood staining her and marking her out is going to be important. In fact, I would keep an eye out for every mention of blood, or red ribbons, red fabric, red spots that appear. It becomes a motif. It's linked to guilt, it's linked to murder, it's linked to being spoiled or stained. And you see it repeated here, actually. I just picked this out because it was dialogue. There's nothing I particularly want to comment on there. But here, Tess stood and waited. The atmosphere turned pale. So we're describing the road again. The birds shook themselves and the hedges arose and twittered. But the lane showed all its white features, and Tess showed hers still whiter. Note how he's personifying the landscape again, as if the landscape is a character, and also that Tess's white features are looking whiter now. It's a sign of her guilt, her shock, her innocence as well, and it's contrasted with the pool of blood in front of her. So white and red coming out as important colours. Think about Tess, that first May Day dance when you met her in is it chapter 2? And she's wearing a white dress and a red ribbon in her hair, almost like she's the sacrifice. Here, I put a little note as well. Now, prism, I don't think I've ever played with one, but that's obviously what makes rainbows. If you get one that's like a perfect triangular pyramid and you shine light through it, a rainbow comes out the other side. And that's what's happening here. When the sun rose, a million prismatic hues reflected from it. So it's like red blood, but out of it comes many different colours and different glittering images. But actually, it's an image of the tragic repercussions of the past. And this image of tragic repercussions is often explored by Hardy. Here, it's suggested in this image of the blood reflecting a million prismatic hues. So Tess's rape will be the figurative death of her innocence in childhood, and from this moment, all sorts of chaos ensues. Okay, so Hardy ends this little description with Tess's own words, which contrast to, again, the formality and complexity of his expression as the narrator, but they definitely emotively describe a young woman driven by guilt. And Hardy uses this moment as a catalyst for a tragic series of events which ineluctably lead to Tess becoming a fallen woman and eventually dying. External factors, more than internal flaws, more than hamasha, are significant in driving forward the tragic plot of Tess of the D'Urbervilles. A key point there. This is a tragic turning point. There are others, but this is like the beginning of the end for Tess, because this incident of the horse dying precipitates other decisions. Tess is motivated by guilt. to put herself in dangerous situations. Okay, I hope that was a helpful analysis. I would make sure you've got either a copy of my notes or make your own, and this will be followed up with a short writing task. Keep going with your reading and chapter notes.